The war in the Middle East widens as Israel strikes Lebanon and a British airbase is targeted in Cyprus. I'm Patricia Karvelas, live from the lands of the Ngunnawal people in Canberra. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. Israel has told the residents of almost 50 villages in Lebanon to evacuate ahead of possible retaliatory strikes, as it says it has struck senior Hezbollah members after their attacks on Israel. The widening conflict has today also seen a British RAF base in Cyprus targeted in a suspected drone strike. Will this war drag into months? I'll ask a former member of the US nuclear deal negotiating team. The Australian government has dodged questions over the legality of the US and Israel's strikes on Iran, saying it was for those countries to explain it. Both the opposition and the government today refused to speculate whether they would back Australian military support for future strikes. I'll speak with Labor frontbencher Anne Ali and the Shadow Foreign Minister this hour. And the government estimates around 115,000 Australians are stranded in the Middle East amid the conflict, with major international transit hubs closed. Foreign Minister Penny Wong says DFAT will wait and see if commercial flights restart before it considers repatriation flights, though travel chaos is expected to continue for days. Let's begin this afternoon with our coverage of the conflict between the United States, Iran and Israel. This morning, Australian time, US President Donald Trump delivered his first on-screen update to the nation with a statement to his Truth Social platform. He claimed US forces had eliminated the entire military command of Iran and swore vengeance after 3 US service members were killed in an Iranian strike on Kuwait.
As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is, likely be more, but we'll do everything possible where that won't be the case. But America will avenge their deaths and deliver the most punishing blow to the terrorists who have waged war against basically civilization.
Until the appointment of a successor to Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, a 3-person leadership council is now running Iran. One of those is the Iranian president, who used the supreme leader's death as a call to arms against the United States and Israel.
The United States and Israel should know that this will bring them nothing but shame. Our dear nation, who are mourning the passing of this great martyr today, with their presence and their participation in mosques and on streets, we must join hands and thwart the evil plans of the enemies.
Back home in Australia, Foreign Minister Penny Wong has sidestepped questions about the legality of the US and Israel strikes on Iran. The Foreign Minister said she had not yet spoken to her US counterpart Marco Rubio.
The legal basis of this is for the United States and Israel to explain.
For some analysis on the latest in this conflict, Ben Knight is a former Middle East correspondent and joins us now. Ben, great to have you on the show. Donald Trump today said he expects this conflict could go on for 4 to 5 weeks. Can the Iranian regime hold on for that long?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And also, is it going to be 4 or 5 weeks? But I think it comes down to what is the end game? What is it that the United States and Israel are trying to achieve here? We know they've talked about regime change, and they've talked about how it's the Iranian people, well, they've urged the Iranian people to rise up and do that essentially for them, because you can't do that without putting troops on the ground, and certainly the United States you wouldn't expect that would happen. So what have we seen in that regard? Well, when the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed, and that was confirmed by Iranian information services, you did see protests, or not protests, celebrations inside Iran. And now that is a very, very dangerous and deadly thing to do under normal circumstances, and presumably under these circumstances as well. You just never saw things like that in Iran without brutal repression. But it's a very long way away from those people celebrating the death of the Iranian leader inside Iran from actually getting up and overthrowing the government. It's a very, very different thing.
How is Iran conducting this war effort compared to that 12-day war we saw last year?
The tactics are very, very different. And in fact, if you look at the way that Iran is conducting this conflict, it's much, much more aggressive. It's doing things that it just didn't do in the 12-day war of June last year. Let's take a look. So first of all, obviously it's hitting Israel, but in the 12-day war, its retaliation was very, very focused on Israel. It didn't hit US bases. It attacked a US base once. That was right at the end of the conflict, and essentially it was a face-saving exercise where it called the Qataris ahead and said, look, we're going to hit this base, and the United States had time to evacuate its troops. No one was hurt. It was harmless. It was symbolic. In this case, no, we already, as we've just heard, have 3 American service members who have been killed. Other US targets have been hit. That's not symbolic. That's putting pressure back on the United States. Now, it has to be said, of course, that Iran is facing an overwhelming military force here. The combined military force of the United States and Israel. It cannot defeat that military force, but it can apply pressure. So it's doing that through striking US military bases. It's hitting civilian targets in US-friendly countries. We've seen that happen in Bahrain, and we've seen that happen in the UAE. We've seen apartment buildings, high-rises being hit. So there you have US-friendly countries who didn't expect this war, who didn't want this war, who are feeling the impacts of it. You're also seeing Iran do something it didn't do last time, which is shut down the shipping, the oil shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. It threatened to do it last time. The Iranian government actually, or the Iranian parliament actually passed a motion saying it would do it, but it never happened. This time it is, and as we've heard, that's a very, very significant pain point for the wider world. We've just seen that an oil ship has been hit in the Strait of Oman, in the Gulf of Oman, and we've seen that a UK base has been hit in Cyprus. So there you're drawing in Europe as well. So we saw the UK, France and Germany put out a statement, and they were saying that in the UK's case that it would enable defensive measures to be taken from its military bases. All 3 countries said that while they would not take part in this, that they essentially didn't rule it out. So you have those other, you have the world being drawn in, the world, and on top of that, of course, you've got the pressure points coming from inside the United States. There was 1 in 4 Americans who were okay with the idea of this war. Now that might have changed after the death of Ali Khamenei, because as we heard John Barron talking about earlier, Americans love a win. But when you see coffins coming home draped in American flags, who've been killed in a foreign war, that's a very, very different thing. So are the Iranian tactics about sort of putting that pressure back on the United States from its allies and other countries saying, wrap this up?
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful point. So we've seen some casualties. If there are more, of course, the politics will become, you would suspect, more difficult for Donald Trump, particularly given he was the guy that got elected on the promise of, ending forever wars, looking at his own backyard. He didn't appear like a warmonger. He's behaved very differently, though, since he's been elected. How cranky is the MAGA base?
Well, you're seeing divisions yet again in this, and that's interesting. The first real cracks between Donald Trump and his MAGA base came over the Epstein files, where he, as the pressure increasingly came back on him, as it was increasingly apparent that he was going to be mentioned in the Epstein files, and he said, oh, it's a hoax, it's a Democrat hoax, there's nothing there, can everybody please move on? Because he had campaigned so hard on the Epstein files, it was the first real time you had seen his MAGA base break with him. Now, that's not, his support has remained, but it was an interesting division. Now there's another division on something that they really responded to during his campaign, which was getting out of the forever wars. Not, in fact, I remember him saying, it's about the wars that we don't get into. And he, during this second term, has been really one of the presidents who has been perhaps more willing than others to use the US military, and that really doesn't gel with what he campaigned on, what he told the MAGA base in America that he wouldn't do, and because it's what they really responded to. So I mean, this is very, very politically difficult. He said that it'll go for 4 weeks. Donald Trump has a habit of throwing time periods out there. Usually it's 2 weeks. I'll come back to you on that on 2 weeks. Well, let's see what happens in 2 weeks. 4 weeks gives him a bit of time, but it's interesting. Now that the Iranian Supreme Leader is dead, does he start looking for an off-ramp? In fact, we've just heard breaking in the last half hour or so that an Iranian spokesperson has said, we're not going to negotiate with Donald Trump. So he doesn't get an off-ramp there potentially at the moment. And so he doesn't get that opportunity to sort of declare a victory and walk away. The Iranian people don't look like they're in the throes of overthrowing the government there, which would be an enormously difficult thing to do. They don't have the weapons, they don't have the money, they don't have the training, and the Iranian regime so far seems to be holding on. And in some sense, to achieve victory, maybe that's all they have to do.
It's such a good point. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Now, on a different matter, in the chamber today, Foreign Minister and Senator Penny Wong has moved a censure motion against One Nation leader Pauline Hanson. Now, the motion relates to comments made by Senator Hanson on live television last month, where she suggested there were no good Muslims. Senator Wong says the comments distressed all Australians.
Nearly 1 million Australians practice Islam. They are doctors, nurses, tradies, teachers, small business owners, firefighters, police officers and veterans. They are imams, community leaders and role models. They are parents and grandparents, brothers and sisters. They are the kids catching the bus home from school every day. And they are the first to condemn the radical extremists who commit terrorist acts in the name of religion. And to claim that none of them are good is to say there are no good Australians amongst them. Is to tell a child that no matter how hard they study, how kindly they treat others, how much they love this country, they will never belong.
Minister for Multicultural Affairs, Small Business and International Development, Anne Ali, joins me this afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Patricia.
I want to get to those comments, but let's just start on this regional war we're seeing.
Sure.
Why is international law not a concern for your government's support for these strikes?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to just express our solidarity with the people of Iran and the Iranian diaspora, as well as the broader Middle Eastern diaspora here in Australia, who may have family and friends over in the region and who are understandably very concerned at the moment. So that's the first thing I want to state. The second thing I will say is that we did not participate in this actively, but we do support an action that took out an oppressive leader who has committed unspeakable atrocities against his own people. I think the estimates are around 50,000 Iranians killed by the regime, specifically by Khamenei, over the past few months, I believe, and a regime that has consistently flouted international law.
There's no doubt that that's the case with him, but it's more about the method. Does the government support regime change?
The government supports the rights of the Iranian people to choose their regime, to have a say in who governs them. For too long, they have been oppressed and shackled by an oppressive leader. I don't think anybody in Australia, and particularly the majority of the Iranian diaspora here in Australia, feels any sadness over the death of Khamenei.
No, but here it is the US trying to bring on regime change, and it appears without much of a strategy. I mean, that's dangerous, isn't it?
Well, look, I think regime change is one thing, but I think we also have to look at the fact that we had to do something. The international community had to do something in dealing with a rogue state and with an oppressor who has committed unspeakable atrocities against his own people, and not to mention also that the Iranian regime was behind two potential terrorist attacks in Australia as well. We've taken action against that regime. We expelled the ambassador. We've had umpteen sanctions against Iran. If anyone has a better option, what was it?
People like Doug Cameron, former Labor senator, say basically this is the American propaganda. This is the Israeli propaganda. Is that what you're doing?
No, not at all. I mean, there are facts and there's propaganda. And I think if you speak to any Iranians, particularly here in the diaspora that I've spoken to, they will tell you that they have lost family, that they have lost friends at the hands of a brutal dictatorship. That is not propaganda. That is real people.
That is absolutely correct. But it's more about the way that this has been executed. And clearly, there is nothing like upsetting people more than their fellow citizens dying because bombs are being rained down on them. Isn't that the problem?
Well, I would say for the Iranian diaspora, what has been upsetting them for many, many months now, in fact, for a number of years, has been the way in which the Ayatollah Khamenei has treated the citizens of Iran with absolute contempt, has rained down terror on his own people, and has flouted international law at every opportunity. So I would say that we back the actions that took out a despot.
How about the ongoing actions now? So that despot is now dead. Iranians have even confirmed it, so we know this. Ongoing military action that could go up to 4 weeks. Are you comfortable with that?
We would urge de-escalation as soon as possible, and I think Minister Wong has already stated that, and has made that very clear.
It should be finished now.
I think we would all. Everybody would urge de-escalation. We do not want to see this into, a full-blown right across the Middle East.
It is already a regional war.
I do note that Iran has done, retaliatory attacks by the Iranians. I would hope that people would come to the negotiating table sooner rather than later, and we can see an end to this quickly and swiftly.
Okay. Are you concerned about mosques and Islamic community centres in Sydney and Melbourne openly inviting members to honour the martyrdom of Iran's dead leader?
Look, I think that, and I want to make clear that they're Shia mosques, so there is a sectarian difference within Islam of the Sunni and the Shia mosques. And I think that people in Australia, it's a tenet of who we are as Australians, that people are free to practice their faith as long as it is within the law. I would reiterate that as Australians, we do not mourn the loss of a tyrant and a despot who has committed these attacks. Is it appropriate that
these mosques mourn this man?
Look, I think, as I said, I think, mosques and people of faith are free to practice their faith as long as it's within the law. Is that
within the law?
Currently, there is no law that says you cannot mourn the loss of your supreme leader, if that's how they see him.
If that's how they.
Well, of course it concerns me. I think whenever we have something that has the potential to create division in Australia, that concerns me, whether it's words coming out of Pauline Hanson's mouth or whether it's actions such as this. But I will say that as Australians, and we have made this very clear, Penny Wong has made it clear, Richard Marles has made it clear, the Prime Minister has made it very clear that we do not mourn the loss of Khamenei.
But under Australian law, you're saying that you can't stop mosques mourning his death.
Well, I don't believe there is a law. If there is a law that prevents that, then I stand corrected.
Does that mean there needs to be law reform? I mean, some people would argue that. I'm not arguing for it myself.
Well, I don't know. Let's be careful what we wish for here, I guess. Do we want to have a law that dictates who you can and can't mourn in this country? I mean, we do have to be careful when we talk about these things. What I'm saying is that if there is a law currently and they are flouting that law or they are going against that law, I stand to be corrected.
In terms of our values, though, and this goes to points the opposition has been making about this sort of who's in Australia and who's not, if there are Australian citizens mourning the death of this man, that's That's sinister, isn't it? That's disturbing.
Yes, but I don't know that we can make laws about every Australian value that we espouse as Australians. I think there's more work to be done in that regard around civics and around what are Australian values and education and bringing people along with us. I don't know that laws are always the answer to everything, Patricia.
I want to talk about Pauline Hanson and the censure motion. That is obviously a key moment in the Senate. You're not in the Senate, but it's a moment.
Thank God.
Yes. Whether she's censured or not, though, was contentious. The opposition didn't believe in the censure part, but they have condemned her. There's a couple, I think, who've crossed the floor on that issue, though, in the Senate. Is that the Parliament speaking as one?
Well, I think the censure motion was completely appropriate. I think objectively, anyone who has listened to Pauline Hanson, not just on the recent remarks that she made about Muslims, but over the years, whether it's in relation to First Nations people or Asians, know that she's a racist and that she uses racist language. And we've seen the kinds of things that kind of racist language can do. We've just recently had a man arrested in WA who was plotting a terrorist attack on Muslims, praying in mosques at the most sacred time of the Muslim calendar, Ramadan. So words have meaning.
Do you link the two? Do you see that?
I think there is a rising Islamophobia. I think Pauline Hanson has done a lot to normalise anti-Muslim hatred, and those words that she iterated the other day. It's not the first time, by the way, that she's targeted Muslims. Let's be clear on that. She has said it before. I think that she attempts to normalise anti-Muslim hatred. And I think that, by and large, Australia has been very successful on social cohesion. There are times when we are tested, sure, but we've always risen to the challenge historically. And now is a moment for us to rise to the challenge again. And I think the censure motion in the Senate was absolutely the correct thing to do and sent a very, very clear message that we do not tolerate racism, number one, and secondly, that as leaders in this place, we have a responsibility and our words carry meaning, and we have a responsibility with our words to ensure that we do not inflame tensions, that we do not encourage hatred, and that we certainly do not encourage acts of violence.
Minister, many thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Patricia.
Now, staying with the war in the Middle East, Alan Eyre is a former senior US diplomat and Iran expert for the US government. He was a key member of the US negotiating team for the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. He's now a distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute, and I spoke to him a short time ago. Alan, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Patricia.
We've seen Hezbollah claim responsibility for launches on Israel, which now sees Israel striking Beirut. Can we already call this now a regional war?
Well, I think, Patricia, we could have called it a regional war beforehand, given that Iran was lashing out at all the countries in the Persian Gulf that were hosting U.S. military bases and causing damage. In contrast, I think the Hezbollah attack on Israel was somewhat perfunctory, if not performative, due to the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei. So it's still an open question the extent to which Iran's proxies will seek to engage either Israel or the United States. But yeah, we've already got a destabilizing regional situation.
Hezbollah did not intervene in last year's 12-day war. What's changed this time?
Well, and again, I'm not sure that Hezbollah is committing to joining to open a second front against Israel. It's been pushed north of the Litani River in Lebanon. Its domestic political situation within the context of Lebanese politics is far weaker. Israel is more aggressive in preemptively deterring Hezbollah strikes. So again, I don't think Hezbollah at this point is fully committed to opening a front against Israel. And the main action is still the United States and Israel bombing Iran, while Iran is seeking to attack U.S. and Israeli targets in the region.
Donald Trump says on the length of this operation, he could go short, he could go long. He actually just told the New York Times they intend 4 or 5 weeks. That's what the New York Times is reporting, and that it won't be difficult to keep up the intensity. What determines how long the war goes for?
Well, both sides have a say, and you're quite right, Patricia. President Trump has said many things, many of them conflicting, on how long this war could go for. He said at one point recently, it could go for 3 or 4 days and I could stop. He said it could go for weeks. One key metric to watch is the fact that the United States has a very limited number of interceptor missiles. Iran has lots of missiles. Many of them are cheap. So every missile that Iran fires, either the U.S. or Israel has to deploy or can deploy a very expensive interceptor missile. And Iran has far more missiles than the U.S. has interceptors. So what the U.S. is trying to do is trying to destroy not the missiles, but the launchers that Iran is using. So that's a key metric in terms of how long this war could go for.
Is there any actual clear path to the regime change that Donald Trump says is now open to the Iranian people? What would that look like?
I don't see it, Patricia, because while it's relatively easy from a military point of view to cause serious damage to the Iranian institutions that are governing Iran, there's no alternative institutions that stand ready to take its place. So if in fact the U.S. were to bomb Iran long enough to make it a near-failed state where very little worked and much of the leadership was killed, there's nothing that can fill that vacuum. There's no alternative government that we could plug in. So paralyzing the regime is relatively easy. Replacing it with something that functions and is pro-Western or pro-Israel is much, much harder.
Now, Donald Trump says they had 3 very good choices about who could lead Iran. That sounds mysterious. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, that doesn't make much sense to me, Patricia, in the sense that Iran still has leadership. The institutions that rule Iran are still there. Yes, the U.S. administration killed the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who'd been in that position since 1989. But then the government moved quickly to constitute a 3-person interim temporary leadership council until the next supreme leader is picked. Yes, U.S. and Israel have killed a handful of important Iranian military leaders. They've all been replaced. Iran expected these attacks, expected to lose large chunks of its leadership, and had already designated replacements. So when President Trump says he's identified people with whom he can negotiate, I think what he means is anybody would have been better than Khamenei. Khamenei's dead, so we have a better chance of negotiating with his successors.
He also compared it to the Venezuelan operation that saw Maduro arrested and captured, and his number 2 relatively seamlessly take control. Is there a comparison? How do you compare them?
I compare them by saying those are totally different situations. The action that he did there was a very limited strike, and it was a case where if you replace one person, you can in effect make significant changes. That's certainly not the case with Iran. As we've seen, it's not enough to kill one person. Israel killed many people in last year's 12-day war. So Iran is a country of 92 million people with a system that's been in place since 1979. It's got institutions that, while not admittedly popular, have deep and wide roots. So getting control of Iran or dictating the future of Iran is more than killing a few people. It's swapping out the infrastructure, the institutions, and that's not possible from the air using bombs.
Okay, so is it possible with boots on the ground? And what's the possibility that Trump, even with a base that's very concerned about so-called forever wars, might shift on this?
I think it highly unlikely that he would commit ground troops to Iran. He knows how unpopular it is. Already polls are showing that this action he's done so far is not popular either with the American people or even with his political base. So I think that he would be faced with serious domestic adverse repercussions were he to try to expand this war by sending ground troops into Iran, which is a huge country, as I said, with 92 million people.
Yeah, it's enormous. What do you think then, or who do you think is the likely successor in the regime? I mean, what could work? How do you see the lay of the land?
Well, again, according to the Iranian constitution, they have to pick a new cleric. There's a handful of people that the supreme leader has designated. They're all more or less the same as he was in terms of ideological outlook. But the key thing about Iran is it's really not a theocracy. It's a military security state. Some of the people in charge wear robes, have turbans, but the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is their main military organization, is the most powerful institution in Iran. It's the one most committed to preserving this regime's existence. And so they'll be the people, whomever is picked as the next supreme leader, behind the scenes, actually controlling things.
You're a former diplomat that dealt extensively with Iran. Did the idea of taking out Iranian leadership ever come up as a distinct possibility?
Again, everything's discussed at the highest levels of the U.S. government. I mean, they have plans for almost anything. But certainly when we were negotiating the JCPOA in the 5 years between 2010 and 2015, as far as I know, there was no plans to take out the leadership. First of all, it contravenes international law, and the previous administrations have been more concerned about that than this one. And secondly, our first goal was to put serious limits on the Iranian nuclear program so they couldn't have a nuclear weapon. We did that. And so it wasn't necessary. And I would assume previous administrations didn't think it was the right thing to do.
Do you think the US conducted last week's negotiations in good faith?
I don't really think they were negotiations, Patricia. There was more like discussions. I think the U.S. and Iran, from the beginning of the second Trump administration, never fully committed to serious and sustained negotiations. They each had red lines, and those red lines never moved closer to each other. So, last week with the last round of negotiations, the U.S. realized that Iran would not, and I'm using the word Steve Witkoff used, capitulate to U.S. demands. And so they said enough with negotiations. So, yeah, diplomacy was never really given a chance by either side.
Are you concerned or disappointed that countries like ours, Australia, have been unable to express concerns about this contravening international law?
I'm disappointed by the fact that we seem to be moving into an age where much less consideration is given to observing what we used to call the rules-based international order, to paying attention to the international law. I mean, there's been almost no discussion in the United States about whether this is the right thing to do morally or whether it violates U.S. law in terms of not getting congressional authorization, or international law, because under international law, the only legitimate reason to use force, or one of the two, is to prevent an imminent attack. And Iran wasn't going to attack the United States.
Thank you so much for your analysis. It's been really great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me, Patricia.
Late on Friday last week, the Liberal Party announced it would suppress the findings of its 2025 election loss review, with the ABC previously revealing that the former opposition leader, Peter Dutton, had claimed elements of the review could be defamatory. It came on the same day as recently deposed Liberal leader Susan Lee announced her resignation, declaring she hoped her brief tenure had paved the way for the next woman to be elected opposition leader. Giselle Kaptarian is a former Liberal candidate who narrowly lost the seat of Bradfield at last year's election, and she joins me now. Welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, PK.
In Susan Lee's statement last week, she said she had hoped her brief tenure had paved the way for the next woman to be elected Liberal leader. Do you agree, or has the way she's been treated and now gone harmed that prospect?
PK, look, before I answer that question directly, can I also just take a moment to acknowledge the people of Iran at this time and the fight for freedom and self-determination that they've been on for decades now. We don't know how the next few weeks are going to materialise, but whatever happens, I certainly hope it's a turning point for freedom for them. On to your question, I am sitting here as the former Liberal candidate for Bradfield, who's had the enormous privilege and experience of engaging with Susan over the entire time that I had my political aspirations to run at the last election. This is the first time that we are seeing a parliamentary sitting period in the last 25 years begin without Susan in our ranks. And so that's a sad day, and it's a loss of that talent and experience that the Liberal Party had seriously backed as a leader of the party, as our first female leader of the federal Liberal Party. But it also is a moment for us to take a moment to see how far we have actually come as a party. Susan came in at a time where we're also seeing major momentous shifts happening across the state, across the country, where we have federal Liberal leader, we have Liberal leaders in key states, Kelly Sloan in New South Wales, the fantastic Jess Wilson in Victoria. We're seeing a movement of coming through the ranks, of women coming through those ranks. And as somebody who, in the 3 months and couple of weeks I had to run, had Susan come out multiple times in those weeks to stand by my side, campaign, roll up her sleeves, do the dirty work with me. Rather than just turning up for a press conference, she would kind of, do the door knocking, get her hands dirty is a better way to say it, and really just an amazing mentor and somebody who was a trailblazer.
And do you think that the way she ultimately went will leave a stain?
I think it was certainly observed by many people that from the very beginning, I don't think it's controversial to say that she wasn't given the fullest circumstances to succeed. And I think any keen observer of politics would have to agree with that. The problem is, of course, in politics, it's a numbers game, and it is a ticking, you get given a portfolio, and in that moment, the starting gun starts, and then it's about whether you can demonstrate to your party room and the people around you that you remain the right choice. I still think that in the circumstances, Susan should be given a lot of credit of what she managed to do in that short period of time that she was given to lead the party.
The Liberal Party says it will suppress its election review. Do you think that's the wrong decision?
PK, we're in an environment where people are seeking transparency and trust in the institutions that are seeking to lead them. I think it doesn't do anyone any favours to keep this report under wraps. But at the same time, I know that Angus Taylor and Jane Hume have done a great job of reaching out beyond the report to ask people who had the experience on the ground to tell them what they thought has gone wrong. I think it would be made much easier for a holistic strategy to be put in place if we had that report come to light for everybody.
I've got to say, I don't know how closely you watched Question Time, but the entire Question Time was very much focused in terms of strategy on IS brides. Now, I don't need to hear your views necessarily on IS brides and the way that's playing out. It's more about barely any questions on the economy. You ran in a so-called teal seat. Now it's been won by somebody who's an independent. In terms of a strategy, how does that land on you? Is that the right strategy?
PK, at this point in time, with what you've been spending the last 40 minutes talking to your viewers about, what we've been seeing over the last 24 hours, 48 hours internationally, it's very clear that what's top of mind today is the same thing that was top of mind at the election, which is a strategy for understanding and securing Australia's future. It's about reducing cost of living pressures. It's about reducing the size of government. It's about creating choice. But above all else, it's about putting in place a plan so that people can understand that the next generation will have a future that is better than the ones who have gone before. And as we know, that is very much in question at the moment. In fact, we have seen living standards drop under the Labor government. We have seen a record number of small businesses go under. The record speaks for itself. Add on to that the ever complicated international arena, and we have pressures on energy, we have pressures on international supply chains, we have a whole series of international shocks that will be felt as a result of this weekend's actions. People really want to understand what the future looks like for them. And they have every right to be asking their federal representatives what that plan actually is.
Just finally, do you think the party needs to reject the preferences of one nation to be viable in electorates like the one you ran in?
I think we've got to be very conscious of the fact that one nation is tapping into a particular set of grievances. But the challenge for both major parties is to ensure that we acknowledge those grievances. They're clearly, it is a true sentiment. We cannot engage in the politics of the deplorables as Hillary Clinton engaged with, and of the Trump supporters. That would be a huge error. The sentiment, the growth of support for one nation sends a clear signal that something is missing in the messaging from the two majors. But what I do believe with all my heart is that the Liberal Party will have a solution for actually being able to turn those grievances into an actionable plan for a strong economy, for a strong Australia that sees all people included in that plan going forward.
Just a quick one. You're going to be a candidate the next election?
If the membership of the Liberal Party will have me.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, PK.
There are an estimated 115,000 Australians in the Middle East amid the conflict. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles says the situation in the Middle East remains fluid and couldn't confirm when or if repatriation flights would occur.
The fundamental issue right now is that the airspace is closed, so there are no flights at all. And while we are engaging in contingency planning, I won't speculate about that, other than to say that once the airspace reopens, I would expect actually that it's more likely commercial flights are in a position to operate in the most expeditious way. But we will continue to advise people through those channels of the circumstances and what we're doing.
Global oil prices have spiked as the strikes on Iran disrupt shipments of the commodity through a key waterway. One Nation MP Barnaby Joyce says Australians will see that at the petrol bowser soon.
It's a shame in a crisis like this that we've got ourselves down to 2 oil refineries. It's a shame that we haven't done the really war game the economic consequences for Australia. But we've got the old policies, cross the fingers. Everything should be right as long as President Trump is able to bring this to a conclusion. We don't want this to go on. People have got to start looking at what the effects are for Australia, not just the Middle East. And you can start looking for those effects at a petrol pump near you.
For the opposition's view on Australia's role in the conflict in the Middle East, I spoke to the Shadow Foreign Minister Ted O'Brien a short time ago. Ted O'Brien, welcome to the program.
Thank you, PK. Great to be here.
Does this war comply with international law?
Well, there's going to be a lot of people, especially international legal experts, who will have an opinion on that. My view is that what the United States and Israel are aiming to achieve is in our national interest. In fact, I think they're doing the heavy lifting for the free world, and it therefore deserves our support.
Okay, you say it's in our national interest. What we're seeing unfold across the Middle East is now quite obviously a regional war. How is that in our national interest?
Well, PK, if you look at the Iranian regime, this regime is no friend of Australia.
Yeah, that's right, but this regime existing.
This is a regime that has sought to orchestrate terror activity on our shores. Far more grave activity on the shores of many other nations. It is anti the values that we represent as a country. And it is for that reason that I say that the United States and Israel, they've been doing the heavy lifting for the free world, and that includes Australia.
So do you support it because you want to see regime change?
I support it principally for the objectives outlined by the United States and Israel. First and foremost, we do not want to see this regime have a nuclear weapon. Secondly, we don't want to see them having advanced ballistic missile capabilities. Now, when it comes to regime change, I have to be honest with you, I do not shed a tear over the death of the Ayatollah, nor his leadership team.
I don't think it's about that, though, but who takes over? Where's the plan?
So let me finish if I can. As for who takes over and where to from here, I don't pretend to be the expert on this. I mean, this is in the fog of war. These are some of the uncertainties we all have to deal with. However, there's no doubt, they have basically taken off the head of the snake. As to where to from here, well, only time will tell. Only time will tell.
Don't they need to have a plan?
Well, you're suggesting that they don't. If there is an operational plan, I'm sure it's not something that the President or Benjamin Netanyahu would necessarily be flagging in great detail.
What should Australia do?
Australia should do exactly what we have done thus far, and that is have very strong bipartisan support for the actions of the United States and Israel.
Should we be involved?
Well, to my understanding, Australia has not been asked.
But if we are to be asked, would you support
it has not been asked to be involved. The government would have the support of the coalition if it were in Australia's national interest to provide support.
You were the former Shadow Treasurer. This is clearly going to hit our budget bottom line potentially, isn't it?
Well, it'll certainly have a supply shock. There's no doubt about that. On the global economy,
cost of living worse.
At this stage, you'll probably see consumers hit at the bowser first, is most likely. But keep in mind, and this is one of my concerns, is the Albanese government has not prepared Australia for these sort of external shocks. You have inflation going up, interest rates going up, debt going up. This leaves us more exposed as a country compared to previous external shocks. And so compared to peer countries, we're exposed because of the way the government has been running the economy. And I caution the government about trying to use this as an excuse for inflation and interest rates.
There would be a shock. I mean, you even concede that it's going to have an impact on our cost of living.
I believe there will be, but if I can finish my comment, I caution the government against using this as an excuse as interest rates continue to go up, because it is standard practice for the Reserve Bank to look through temporary supply shocks like this. Interest rates are going up because the government continues to pour more money into the economy. This does not change that. But indeed, what we will see through however long this goes for and however wide the scope of the conflict is, it will have a supply shock to the economy, principally in the area of energy.
And so, which brings me to the kind of way that this has been handled in the Parliament, for instance, all of these issues. Why didn't the new leader or the opposition focus on the economy today in question time?
Well, of course, there are some big issues that we need to tackle today.
Was the biggest issue in Australia today really the ISIS brides? Because that's, if you're watching question time, you would think that that was the biggest crisis in our country.
Well, there are two priorities. One, we need to protect our way of life. And two, we need to restore people's standard of living. What you saw in question time today was a laser focus on the first of those two priorities. Now, Angus Taylor, as our leader, has been crystal clear. They are the two priorities for the Australian people. Therefore, they are the priority for the Liberal Party and the Coalition. You saw that first priority at the centre of the questions we posed to the government. Questions, by the way, they evaded. There is not a question asked of the government today about bringing back the ISIS sympathisers that the government actually addressed.
There was no economic focus from the opposition when the economy is the first issue people are raising.
Well, again, two priorities. We dealt with the first priority today.
But it's not Australians' first priority, is it?
Well, you're the commentator. You can have a view.
Surveys show it's the economy.
You can have a view. You can have a view. And I think we'll continue to prosecute the case on the economy. Absolutely, again, because we need to restore people's standard of living. One of the problems we have in question time is there's not a question asked by the opposition to the government that the government answers. They evade every single question. And if you ask the Australian people, do they care about their way of life? I do believe they do care. There's a reason why I've seen a fraying of social cohesion in this country. It's a lack of leadership from this government. And so we must continue to prosecute the case. We must continue to ask the hard questions. They do not answer those questions. You wouldn't let me get away with not answering questions, PK, but when it's in the House, we don't have the luxury to run, the House as you do an interview.
I'm definitely not in charge of the House, which is a pity, really. Don't you agree?
Oh, indeed. Wouldn't it be a different world if PK was in charge?
All right. Just on Pauline Hanson, why did you not censure, obviously, the coalition in the Senate? You're not in the Senate, but you didn't censure Pauline Hanson. Why not?
Oh, look, I'm not sure what's happening in the Senate in terms of Senate procedures. I believe there's a debate going on at the moment about Pauline Hanson's comments. So, look, I'm not going to get into the mechanism of the Senate because, candidly, I don't understand the mechanism of the Senate. But I'm happy to be clear on this. I assume you're talking about Senator Hanson's comments about Muslims. I think those comments are completely out of line. Again, I think they are divisive. I believe they do lead to a breakdown in social cohesion. There is nothing more important in this country when it comes to protecting one's way of life than having unity, having national unity. And that means respect for everybody. That is the core value of Australia is freedom. That means respect for freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom regardless of where one comes from. That's a basic principle. It's a liberal principle. It's a coalition principle. I believe it is also one of the core values of Australian society. It should be protected at all times.
Ted O'Brien, I'm really pleased you came to the studio.
Thanks very much, PK.
And I want to bring in my political panel for today. First sitting day of the fortnight. Garth Hamilton is now the Shadow Assistant Minister for Energy and Security, which means he gets a better seat also in the House of Representatives. Patrick Gorman is the Assistant Employment Minister. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have to talk about the biggest story in the world, which is, of course, the war in the Middle East. And I can say in the Middle East because even Cyprus was hit today, and that's, really officially Europe. So we're talking about a growth in what is a regional war. I'm going to start with you first, if I can, Garth. Are you worried about this war? Is this something that could look like a forever war?
I get tremendously worried about war in the Middle East. I spent a lot of time in my life over there, and regime change is not something that happens easily. And for anyone who's thinking that's what's going to follow, very, very quickly, I'm sad to say I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think the history shows us we're going to have a prolonged, sadly, prolonged escalation of violence over there, and to see Cyprus getting hit. This is starting to spread very, very quickly. I don't want that to happen. There's nothing about this that makes me in any way happy.
So why is the coalition backed in so strongly?
Oh, look, I think there's a position that we will always stand by our allies, and the United States have been very strong in their position on that. But that doesn't mean that we should be making any judgment or snap judgments about our role in that.
So you think we should be very careful about whether we...
I think we should always be very, very careful about any steps we take to put Australian lives at risk. That's a very serious consideration that anyone should be making, either in government or in opposition. And we only have to look back a couple of years in the same area to see the really traumatic situation we put Australian personnel in.
You're a centre-left government and you've just backed in the US and Israel taking this action that's now already led to a regional conflict. Is that wise?
Well, I think let's start with the Iranian regime is a brutal regime. They murder their own people. They have a horrendous record when it comes to human rights, which is something I care about. Sure. And then it comes to their nuclear ambitions, which does threaten not just regional but global stability. Of course, I don't want to see broad regional escalation of this conflict, but the actions that the United States and Israel have taken, we support.
Okay. You know how weird this is. You're like the Labor MP and you're a coalition MP and you're more cynical about the war than you. What's going on?
I'm speaking to my personal experience over there, and I think a lot of people should do that. I have seen firsthand what's happened to communities in that area, and I think it's very important that we don't go in with a gung-ho attitude about regime change in the Middle East. Having said that, I think Mr. Gorman said something very, very important there. This is not a government that's been doing good things by its own people.
No one would ever say it, right? It's about what is the alternative and what's the plan for it?
Well, look, as it stands right now, we are in a conflict. We're seeing that grow day by day. I think the best thing for us now is to make sure that, for a start, we get everybody out of there who is an Australian citizen that we can, and that's been a big issue of conversation today.
Yeah. The point I'm making about how this is unusual, and Garth is talking to his personal experience, there is a lot of concern, actually, about what this looks like. Is this a one and done thing that Australia supports? Take out the Ayatollah and then stop? Do you want de-escalation?
Well, firstly, I appreciate Garth sharing his personal experience, and there are hundreds of thousands of Australians who have family connections to the region, have worked there. Many Australians transit through this region every single year. But when it comes to what you're asking me to do, which is to speculate about where this goes in the future, I'm not in a position to do that, and it would be irresponsible to do so.
But is Australia writing a blank cheque to the US and Israel to keep going?
What we've said very clearly is we support the actions that have been taken so far. That's the statement we've made. We are not committing Australian assets or Australian troops to this conflict.
And would you be very reluctant if asked?
Obviously, and you've seen that reluctance in a range of statements that have been made.
Okay, so you don't, any assistance, you're saying Australia should not be involved?
Well, the United States are leading these actions. We support the decision the United States has taken, but it's a decision they have taken with their assets.
This, of course, will have an enormous impact on potentially our economy and prices. I mean, your side has been really focused, not so much in question time today, but I'm going to park that, but generally trying to talk about the cost of living. And the cost of living is just going to get worse now, isn't it?
We've seen the impacts of global conflict on the international economy and here in Australia before, and I'm sure this will play out to us very quickly as well. I think one of the issues that we have here is the sort of global exposure to energy markets in that region, and that's going to continue for some time yet. But clearly, that's a big issue for us to deal with.
Yeah, it's going to make the cost of living more acute for Australians.
I recognise that Australians are already under pressure. And events in the world, as we've been saying for our entire time in government, conflicts in Ukraine have had an impact when it came to inflationary pressures. This will have an impact on the Australian economy. It will have a range of different impacts. It will drive demand for some of Australia's exports. It will make it harder to get supplies that we rely upon for parts of industry in our economy. We have to be open about that. But we'll keep doing what we have done as a government, which is find practical ways to support Australian households. And one area which I think you see, it sort of shows that actually getting Australia to have more energy independence through things like the electrification projects that we've been backing for the last 3.5 years does make a difference for Australia to be able to have that energy independence that we all want.
Just very brief answers on some mosques mourning the death of this leader. I don't think that's illegal unless you can point to a law, should it be?
I'm big on free speech. I think people should be able to express their views and we should be able to make a judgment on them for that. This is not a good guy.
Not a good guy.
This is not a good guy, and I think we can make a judgment on people who see this as someone that they should be mourning.
People are responsible for their own actions. I don't know why anyone would be mourning this individual.
Okay, but if it's happening and it's in our own country, what do we do?
Look, I will take your word, Patricia, that it may be happening. I'm not aware of that.
Reporting that it's happening?
Well, that is concerning. Let's be honest. This is a brutal regime who wouldn't allow people in his own country to have the sort of freedom of speech that Garth has just strongly supported. I mean, I would encourage everyone who's watching your program, who's thinking of participating in that form of mourning, to rethink it very strongly. Don't abuse your rights.
No.
Don't abuse your rights to free speech.
We are.
And I think that would be an abuse.
We are out of time, but yeah, it is disturbing. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Garth Hamilton there and Patrick Gorman, and that's it for Afternoon Briefing for this afternoon. I'll be back from Parliament House tomorrow. Joe O'Brien is up next with today's top stories. We're on ABC iView.